Jessica Jackson, welcome to About Progress.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you today.
Well, how about you start with a little introduction? I think so much of who you are and what you do and what you're interested in is very connected to your work and who you help serve. So tell us about you.
Sure. So my name, Jessica Jackson. I've got 4 kids. Oldest is 10, youngest is 3. I homeschool them, and then I run Thriving in Motherhood podcast, which is a business where I help women in those survival seasons get to where they feel like they're thriving. And for me, I started motherhood like thinking it would be awesome. It's what I wanted, right? I started it and I didn't think anything except that it's what I wanted. And when I got into it, it was so hard. And I don't even think I knew it was hard. That's not how I was thinking about it, but I was non-functioning. I was taking care of this baby. We had just moved across the country. My husband started grad school. I was in a cinder block wall. No one around me spoke English. We were in like the international grad student housing. So I was very isolated. Our car didn't work. And I just struggled every day. And I had so much mom guilt. Like I'd call my mom and I'd be like, can I put my baby down? She's like, please, that's a good idea. And I was like, I don't think I can. So just like I was certainly
Mm.
in the throes of postpartum depression and anxiety and did not know it for years. And so my youngest was 2, just barely. And then my second son was born and I got something called C. diff in the hospital. And so that is a super bug that attacks your colon and didn't know it. I knew I was very sick and I was not able to sleep for more than a few minutes at a time. And I was just very ill. And so after my youngest was 2 weeks old, I went to the emergency room and they looked at me and they said, okay, that we know exactly what that is. You need to go into isolation. This is very serious.
Oh,
And so I moved into the hospital. The only opening was the pediatric unit. So if you believe in God, that was 100% a miracle because I had a crib and a baby swing ready for my 2-week-old to come move in with me.
wow.
And then I just fought for my life. The antibiotics didn't work for a lot longer than they thought they would. It was a very dangerous time for me and my own health, and wasn't sure how it was going to end. And so I was there for about a week, went home, and it took about 4 months to even sort of like I had to learn how to eat. What could I eat again? Like it just destroyed my body. And so it took a long time to get out of that place. But when I was in that season, the only thing that I could think of is like, I want to start living again. Like this isn't changing. Like I'm going to be a mom. And so I just wanted to embrace my life and love it. And I on the outside, maybe, like I said, I wouldn't have said I was struggling, but like I wasn't feeling anything in my day to day life. And so I went back to what I was comfortable with, which was planning. I grew up on like Stephen Covey's 2 pages a day planners, and it got me through college and middle school and high school. Like I loved planning. But when I became a mom, none of those planning skills transferred.
Hmm?
Like if I would plan out a schedule, the baby wouldn't sleep at the right times, or I would write like this long to-do list on the things not even long. I would write the things I wanted to do that day and I couldn't get to any of them. So I'd transfer them day after day. And so like I had completely given up after those first initial year or so. I'm like, this doesn't work. You can't plan on motherhood. And so I was literally recovering in bed with my newborn next to me and I'm like so sick. And I'm just like scrolling, finding like every single planning spread that you can imagine on the internet and being like, okay, these are all the things in my brain. How can I arrange it? And I couldn't find anything. So I was like, that's fine. I'm going to get a notebook and just start figuring out a way to get something that's in this mess of a brain onto paper in a way that I can feel good about so I can start living my life again. And so that's what I did. And after like 3 years, I stopped changing it. So like for 3 years, I'd make all these iterations. And what was just beautiful was I learned how to get things done again. I learned how to create a dream. Like one of the big things for me was like, even though I had been struggling, I had been listening to podcasts. I had been observing other moms. I had been reading books. I had been learning a ton about homeschooling, just different educational philosophies. And so I started to have this vision of what I wanted my motherhood to be. And so really what I learned how to do was organize this vision about what I wanted my life to be like for even just that year and just focus on a year at a time. And then created this system with my planner to make that vision a reality, but like in a generous way, in the way that actually fit regular motherhood, which was so unpredictable and needed to be incredibly flexible. And so that is kind of where it started for me. My mental health didn't really tank until after I had my 3rd child, and my husband had got his master's and his PhD, and we moved to Connecticut. And we land there and I'm like so struggling. And by that point, I had been sitting in a seminar. It was at church and they were saying like, if you have like any of these 10 things on this list, and I do not remember what they are, they're like, it would be good to go to a therapist. Like you don't have to wait if you just have one of these 10. And I was like sitting there and I felt like I was naked. It's like, I
Wow.
am all 10 of those. I
Hmm.
should have gotten help a long time ago. And so I went and talked to her, this person. I had 3 weeks before we moved. And she was like, okay, we don't have much time. Let's figure this out. What can we do? And she was amazing. She's the only therapist I've ever connected with, but she was just like a miracle. And she's like, all right. She handed me a worksheet on cognitive distortions and taught me about should statements and was like, this is how you're thinking. This isn't working. So here's some options. She didn't even tell me what to do. She's like, here's some papers. Here's the principles. Figure it out. And it was life-changing for me, but not yet. It took time. And so Connecticut, things kind of bottomed out. And that's where I really learned and started getting serious about like retraining my brain. Because even though I could get things done, and even though I had some like semblance of structure to our days and rhythm, and on the outside looking in, my life looked good. We were homeschooling, we were having adventures, like it looked good. I just didn't feel good. Like there was
Mm,
no joy. And I was talking to a friend one night and I was like, I'm checking everything off that I could ever possibly want to do. Like even the fun things, like wool felting pom-poms with my children, and like I don't feel any joy. And she's like, that's really sad. I was like, that's not helpful. I know. And so that's where I just like dug into all of the positive psychology and,
mhm.
high performance habits and just spiritual scriptures, and just learned how to think differently so that I could feel the joy in the life around me that I couldn't feel at the time. So anyway, that's kind of like the really big broad stroke overview, but some of those highlights of nothing happened quickly, nothing happened overnight. I'd solve one problem and it felt like it was whack-a-mole and another one came out,
Yeah.
and just like it took a long time to build skills to the point where now I feel like, okay, I kind of have an idea. If something's off, I can kind of identify why and what I need to do about it. But that is how it started.
I actually, it's so helpful to hear about the full story because when you first introduce yourself as this mom with a lot of kids and homeschooling and an incredible, thriving, successful business and podcast, my first question is, how do you do it all? And we are actually going to talk about that because there are systems to it. But as you've talked about, this has been a long process of learning how to do it all, but not for the sake of doing it all, but for being the person you want to be as you're doing these things, as you're showing up to these responsibilities that matter so much to you. And this is where I want to level with the people who feel like planning is unapproachable because they think it's only for certain types of people, the people who have it all together, the type A Stephen Covey types, or the people who don't have the lives that we have as busy women, especially for those who are in child caring kind of roles, right? So, can you tell us what can change their minds? That maybe they are planning people, that this is a habit, this is a system that can help them as they are and who they are without it having to be the final rung in many, 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 many rungs of changes to lead up to, okay, now I can be a planner person.
Yeah, so I think it goes back to why. Like, I would not just say, like, I think you should be a planner person. I think you should
Hmm.
plan. I think it would help you. I never start there because if you don't have something you're trying to do, then there's no point to plan. So when I talk to moms, they're typically in one of four places, but the first is just bored, right? Like, you just
Mm,
don't even know it. You're watching the clock, the days are taking forever. You're like, so going mind-numbingly crazy, right? The other is busy. Your day is
mm,
so full. You have a ton of things going on. You are going to doing the carb pulls or the sports activities or the children's library events. So your days are full, but it's not really fulfilling to you. It's just busy. Frustrated because there are things that you want to do. There are things that you feel like you want to explore or do or start, and you just don't feel like there's room for you to do them. Or those that are living in alignment, which is where we all want to get, where your time and energy are going towards the things that matter the most to you.
okay.
And so if you're in any of those phases, the number one thing that I start with is this idea of creating a vision. And so for me, this vision, and I think you talk about, you've got your do something list. And I think that is a part for sure of this vision process, right? Where it's you're owning something. And so at first it might be, I have this vision that my laundry is managed so that it's not so incredibly stressful. Like when I say vision, people are like, and I'm like, okay, what are you stressed about? Let's
Mm,
start there. Like that can be your vision, solving one major stress point in your life. But also, what are those things that you're curious about? And that's like where I love your do something list. Um, what is it that matters to you? And the reason why this is so important is because I feel like there's just so much conversation in the motherhood realm about like the home management roles, like who should be doing it. It shouldn't be gender specific. It shouldn't be like just there's so much noise about and should statements about should or should not when it comes to home management. or you should be, delegating it, or I don't know. Just so instead, I just want you to decide like, what is it that you actually want and own it.
Hmm.
If you just want to be good at doing your laundry, great. You're not a victim. You chose it.
Hmm.
If you want, or whatever it is, laundry is an example we can all relate to because we all have to do it. But so the point is you just start there. And and for me, like I didn't know what I wanted. Like my vision now every year after doing it for like 7 years, it's so dialed in. I have specific goals with numbers and things that I want to happen. That is not how this started at all. It was just like I think my first year I picked a word nurture and I thought these are some habits that might be nurturing. I didn't really know. These are some ways I want to nurture my family. We were just trying them out. These are like a project I want to do. But it's in essence, it's what are the projects you want to do? Who do you want to be? What experiences do you want to have with your family? And that's like a great starting point. And just asking yourself those 3 questions. Once you have that, once you have something that you're interested in accomplishing, whether it is something like managing your home and or working on a creative project for yourself, then we can talk about, well, now why do we want to plan? Well, it's because now I've got something that I actually care about that I want to fit into my life
Okay.
and not just all of these things that I'm managing.
That flips things on its head. I think, especially for those who get so easily swept up in the prescriptions and the shoulds because they know what metrics they need to hit in order to count as a good person, or they think that in order to be a planner kind of person, that means they also have to go to bed early and wake up early and have, all these other stacks of habits with it. And instead it's thinking, I love how you said it. What do I want? And how can I own it? Even if that's, I want to rest more. I want to have a hobby. I want to actually get out of the house. And that's where we can start. What are some principles that can help them plan weeks that they can win?
The principle here that matters the most is that you plan within a week, not your days. Because when you're planning a day, you are not going to be able to figure out like, there's too many things that happen. When you plan a week, you've got flexibility. You can learn to gauge. You're not going to get this right the first time. You're going to be able to learn, okay, I can really get about this much done in a week. And so you're going to get feedback and be like, okay, I have to choose less this week. Even though it's hard, I'm going to just own that I'm going to do less this week. And then it gives you like ways to just fill in the gaps and get things done. So that's the first really important principle. The second really important principle is you're planning realistically and not idealistically.
Mhm.
We want to get rid of this idea that I can write down more than I can actually accomplish and feel good about myself. We don't. We don't ever do that. So write down only what you can accomplish and feel good about yourself. And don't keep adding to your list. And then break things up in contexts that make sense to you. So like when I'm sick, when I've been pregnant, I'm like flat on my back. So I created context for what I can do while I'm laying in bed feeling really nauseous. Like I just created a custom context. So create things that make sense for you. Maybe you have a context for when your kids are awake and when your kids are asleep, if they're in the early napping phase. Or maybe you have one for when your kids are at school. So you customize that. But the point is, I want you to start thinking, how can I batch my tasks in a way that makes sense for me in my life? So that when it comes to the moment for me to sit down and work, I know exactly what I want to jump into doing. There isn't the wasting of time trying to figure it out. Like because of what's happening and the circumstances that you're in, you know exactly what to do next. And then don't write down anything unless it is absolutely happening at that time on a scheduled format. Otherwise, leave it in your weekly format of when you're going to get things done. Because I know this goes against everything those productivity people are telling you about time blocking
Mhm.
but like if you are in a season where you either have chronic illness or where you have the exhaustion or where you do have other people living in your life and it's a highly interruptible life, whether you're working from home or you have the young kids or whatever, like there's so many circumstances, especially since the pandemic, where not being able to stick to a time schedule is relevant in all of our lives. Don't put it there. Put it in another format because what's going to happen is that same backlog, right? You're just going to look at the end of the day, I didn't do that, and push it to the next day, and it's just going to get too full. So those are principles that you can then take and apply and customize to your circumstances.
Now, how does that lead to planning in terms of like the tangibles? Like, what does that actually look like? And this might be a good time to introduce the idea of planning a week that you can win, but it may not. So you can direct the course here
Yeah.
on what you think would be most helpful.
Yeah. So the reason why I like this idea of planning a week that you can win is because so often we sit down and we're like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to plan. I have done this so many times. So you're like, okay, I'm going to write, here's my schedule. We're going to this is the thing I'm going to do. Here's my list. I'm going to be productive. I'm going to check it off. And like, first of all, you wrote down 5 weeks worth of stuff in this
Mm,
wonderful week that you're so excited about. You are
mm,
going to be transferring things from week to week to week. You aren't going to get everything checked off. And as you're going about your week, not only that, you're going to keep adding to your
yeah.
week plan because you're like, I thought of these other ideas. This is going to be amazing. You just planned something so idealistic, not realistic. You're going to lose. Like you are not going to get that done at all. So when I say plan, I want to write things down on paper that I am pretty sure that I'm actually going to be able to accomplish and no more. I want everything checked off on my list by the end of the week and not like in a killing myself way, but in a super realistic way. And so I want a weekend, right? Like we don't have natural stopping point. Like I was like, it's just a treadmill, it never ends. Well, you're the one that stepped on the treadmill and turned it on and you
Mm,
haven't stepped off yet. Like so we have to learn how to create some stop points for ourselves. And that's also so important because it's a natural point to look back and see what you did. And one of the most important things that we don't do as moms is turn around and celebrate and see all the progress that we made. And so it's more about taking tiny baby steps, seeing that you made that baby steps, feeling the energy and the joy and the momentum from taking that baby step towards the thing you said you wanted to do, and then do it again because you feel good about it and you're excited. And so when you were in this like starting place though, there's 4 phases and you don't jump into doing all 4 at the same time. There's like skills and I've spent years kind of upping my planning game and building this system. So the very first phase is just management. You're
okay.
just trying to manage the very basics. So what this looks like, you're writing your appointments on your calendar. And for me, because my calendar is so like when you're in those early phase, you said like when you're not busy, right? Like when you don't have tons of things going on. I have one column that's like, I don't know, probably like an inch and a half long per day about my appointments that need to happen. And then if there's specific things that need to happen that day, but not at a specific time, but like literally have to happen that day, then I've got an equal size box on the other half of the page. So there's almost no room. There's very little room to write things down. And there's no time stamped on there because when I would like have this timestamp page, my stress and anxiety goes
Mm-hmm.
150% because I can't assign things to time with all these kids at home. So that's the first thing. You write down your scheduled appointments that have to happen at the time. And then what I like to do also is say, okay, now that I know what my week is going to look like a little bit scheduled appointments wise, what meals fit with those days? Is it cereal? A crock pot? Is it, an Instapot meal that you have to make ahead? Do I have an hour to put something together? Does it need to be quesadillas in 5 minutes because you're running from one thing to the next? But like if you can just manage your appointments and your meals, like right there, since everyone has to eat all the time and it really stinks to be late and stressed, that's like a really good level 1. Next phase that I like to work on is where you start to bring in your what I call your big 3 for the week. So if you go back, you're starting to see, okay, this is my vision, right? Why did that matter so much if we're really talking about appointments and meals? Well, so this is the next part. You look at your vision for the year. I pick what am I going to focus on for the next 3 months? Because the reality is I'm really creating a vision for 3 months. I don't know what's going to happen beyond that at
Yeah.
all. I don't know what my kids are going to be doing. I don't know what problems we're going to be having. I don't know so much. And so I take those 90 days, I pick a few things that I'm going to focus on for those 90 days. Something for me, something for my family, something for my business, something like experience wise that I do, something I just want to do for fun, whatever it was in my vision. And I bring it into those 90 days. And then I pick a few of those to focus on for the month. So now I've got like on my month page, I'm writing down those 3 to 5 things that I'm going to focus on that month. So now when I'm getting to my big 3 for the week, I'm picking at least one of those things from my monthly page onto one thing that I'm going to accomplish this week towards my vision. Now, the reasons why it's not all 3 is because some weeks there's a birthday party. That's going to be one of my big 3. Every week I'm homeschooling. Homeschool is one of my big 3 because that big 3 needs to take account for your time and energy. And so your time and energy like really doesn't have much more than 3 things in a week. Even though we think it does, even though we want it to, it really doesn't. Not when you add in all of the things you're already doing that you don't even think about. The invisible work that we talk about a lot of times, right? Like it takes time and energy to do those things. And so that big 3 is making sure that the most important things to you happen. So it might be your kid's birthday. It might be finding that lost library book that is recurring finds, but it's customized to you and what you're doing. And so as you do that, and then you tack on every month during a review, and you're saying, these are the places that we went. These are the things I discovered and learned. This is what I accomplished. These are important milestones or significant things for our family. These are the books I read. This is the progress that I made towards my vision. You start to create that feedback loop that encourages you to move forward.
Okay, so let me make sure, because I'm one of those people, like, if I have it all kind of sketched out in my mind, I've got this. Where we're starting is with a vision. It's casting a vision of what do I
Yep.
want and owning it. And then what we do from there is we break that down into 90-day, like how we're going
Yep.
to work towards that vision. And then from there, the monthly version of that. And that's where we get our big three,
Yep.
right? Okay. And
Yep.
then when we're going into the actual process of planning, a week that you can win. You start by planning out the management pieces, like what appointments do I have and what meals match that. And then you break down into more doable baby steps, how to make traction towards your big three. Do I have this
Yep.
right?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else?
So I'd say the next crucial piece, and there's like 13 steps. So I have like an entire free
Okay.
workshop people can walk through, and it's got like pictures and images, and I like show it to you.
Especially if they're
But I'd
visual,
say
that would be good. Yeah.
yeah, it is visual, but there's principles that you can apply no matter what. Like you can take all of this and apply it to whatever you're doing. So you don't feel like you have to use my stuff specifically. But another principle that matters so much when it comes to like getting it all done is how you write out your to-do list. So that like long to-do list that we often write down, where you're like scanning up and down, you're like, oh great, the kids are playing. Like I'm gonna go get something done. And like by the time you're like, oh, I don't really feel like doing that. I probably should do that one. It'd probably be good for me to do this one. Like the moment's passed. You did not make progress on anything. And so instead, what I like to do, and I learned this from April Perry, and I think she learned it from Julie Morgenstern, is to have context based to dos. So you have something for your home, computer, phone, errands, and to discuss are the 5 contexts. And so this is like some thing that was developed probably in the 90s that we're all still using.
Yeah.
But the principle here then is when I'm writing out the things I'm going to accomplish this week, things that didn't maybe fall into the big 3, but like I do have to call about my child's doctor's appointments and figure out the time and what's happening there. And I do need to discuss with my husband when we're going to get the babysitter a date. And I need to help a child put something together for church. And I need to have coordinate with someone that's coming over for dinner, and I want to record something about exercising. The point is it's like these are all catch-all things, but I'm not just going to write it in a long list because then I can't decide when I'm going to do what. So instead, those things that I can do in my house with my kids around me, I'm putting under home. So
Hmm.
if they are playing quietly, that's great. The things that when they're like out of the house playing in the yard, I'm going to write phone calls that I need to make under phone. So when they're outside playing, I can batch all my phone calls. When we are going crazy and we need to leave the house because we're losing our minds, I run and do my errands list. Like, it can become addicting at how much you can get done when you batch your list this way, and that's what we have to remember, is this a week I can win? Because it can be too easy to be like, "I can think of all of the things I ever wanted to do out of the house this week," and put it on your errands, and it's like, but what do you actually have capacity for? What is your big 3 for the week? Because when you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And so having this big 3 as your guiding light helps you remember, okay, what actually mattered to me was learning how to bake sourdough this week. And if I say yes to this new thing that I just thought of or someone came to me, that means I'm not going to have time to do my sourdough today. Sometimes the answer is, yeah, it's really important that I go hang out with my friend for fulfillment for both of us or because they really need help. And so it's okay for me not to do that. And sometimes it might be, nope, this really matters to me that I bake sourdough and I learn how to do this thing. And so it creates this way for us to slow down and pause and actually evaluate where we're spending our time. Are we spending on the things that matter to us? And when other things come up, how are we comparing it against the trade off? And so now you have something actually tangible that you're looking at to say, this matters to me more. And it might. And that's okay. Like this is 100% flexible. But the goal is that you are checking off most things every week. And when you get to the end of the week, I'm looking at it and saying, is this even relevant? I'm not automatically transferring it to the next week. You know, there's like other places to put that task if it doesn't work in the next week. So we don't want to have like this backlog of carrying over either. Fresh slate every week so that you can win.
Oh, okay. So I have two follow-up questions with that. Is one, do you have like a brain dump at the beginning of a month or as a week that you then pull from and put into these different contexts? Or just even as you're writing down things, you just know to differentiate, oh, this is possible and this is not. So I'm just not going to even write something down unless I don't think it's possible.
So the way that I have it set up is I have a page for my vision for the year. I have a page for my goals for the quarter. I have a page for my goals for the month. And I say goals lightly. My to-dos, my things I want to do to take care of myself every month, my projects. And on there's a big running to-do list. So if there's something that needs to happen during the month, it goes on that monthly page. If there is something that needs to happen during the quarter, it can go on the quarterly page. And then I also have something called a sandbox. It has all 12 months of the year. And it's like, if I don't want to forget it, and I don't want to put it on the calendar, but I'm not sure where it goes. And it might be like a fun tradition to try with my kids, or it might be like a habit I'm considering starting, or it might be a place that I want to go. I'll put this on my sandbox, these quarterly spreads. So I just can come back and look at it. So that's another spot brain dumps might go. When it comes to management, most of those management things are popping up week to week, right? It's the stuff that people are texting you. It's the stuff that's flooding your email inbox. And so those are, for the most part, just going right onto my weekly spread.
Mhm.
And if it can happen later, it's going onto the to-dos for the month. And if it's something I'm considering, it'll go onto like a sandbox page.
Okay. This is so helpful. And with the big three, and just another clarifying question for that, is this like a category, like homeschooling or work, or are they more very specific, like task oriented, like make your podcast for the work? That's my big three for the week. I have to make sure
Yeah,
I do that.
it is not broad. That is not what we're doing here.
It's
It's so
specific.
it's specific. So for okay, almost. Homeschooling is homeschooling, and that has an entirely different system that I'm using. So for that,
Okay.
I just put homeschooling up so I don't fill that space with something else. Homeschooling is the only thing that gets a 4-hour chunk of my time every day that
Okay.
gets that. Everything else is very specific.
Okay. So, how does this look tangibly? For those who are going back into those stages like you talked about, bored, busy, frustrated, and in alignment, if people feel like they are in any one of those first three, or even all three, okay, I could totally resonate. I've known where I felt both bored, busy, and frustrated all within the same day. If they're in that place, what is the biggest thing that will make planning a week they can win more possible? Just one thing that they can work on.
You got to start with your vision.
Okay.
You have to have a vision. If you don't have that, nothing else matters. Productivity does not matter. Time management does not matter. It you just have to have something that gets you excited to get out of bed in the day. Like that's where we start. Your vision is something that you can get excited about.
I love that that's not productivity focused, you
No,
know,
it's not. Yeah.
because when you are in those stages, when you're in a survival mode, it's more about how can I just be myself? What's going to just help me feel like I'm even showing up, period. It's less about what you get
Well,
done.
and in those survival seasons specifically, your vision isn't about doing, it's about be. It's who
Mm,
do I want to be? So like I've been like I had a hernia surgery. After I had 3 kids, we were in Connecticut, a whole bunch of like series of horrible events happens. So I had surgery and the only thing and in the past I was like it was like fantastic actually because we were moving across the country again and I couldn't participate. So I was kind of on a vacation while
sure.
everyone was doing things around me.
Okay.
But also, I had practiced it was principles I talked about at the beginning about like learning for my mind. I was like, this is great. I can practice because I knew I was going to go through another pregnancy. I knew it was going to be hard.
Hmm.
And so I was like, this is great. I can practice for a few weeks and see if it worked for a really hard pregnancy coming up. And what was wonderful is I said, I realized like instead of feeling guilty and bad, I'm just going to thank people for all the times they helped me. And I'm going to smile at my kids. I can't really
Yeah.
do much more than that. And so instead of laying around all the guilt or even just feeling bad about all the things that I couldn't do or that I wanted to do, because you had better believe, like I have things that I wanted to do. My life didn't just like stop because I couldn't do things. I really just focused on who I wanted to be. And I wanted to be kind. I wanted to smile. I wanted to lighten the mood. So that was my vision. And so like that can be your vision too. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to be doing loads of things or having big projects or even building systems. It can just be who do I want to be right now?
Well, this is where I'm going to end with a couple personal questions and a little bit more rapid fire. But right now, what is your vision of who you want to be in this season?
Oh, I want to go back to the basics. I feel like I'm so good at doing so many different things, and I just want to go back to the basics of my relationship with God, my relationship with my husband and my marriage, my relationship with my kids, and the basics of keeping our household running smoothly, basics and getting business systems up and running well. Just basics. That's my vision. It's
Love
boring.
the
And I'm like so
basics.
happy with boring right now. In the past, I wouldn't have been, but like, I just feel like I'm settling in to realize like, this is good. Boring is good.
Mm, okay. This is a weird question because as we're listening, it's like, oh my gosh, you have been through so much. Like, this has been such an experience of skill building, and a persistence of being willing to keep trying different ways of doing things, but also honoring your season and and being flexible as you're learning the skill of planning in ways that work for you and help you show up better. Would you be willing to just share how you have not arrived? Because as people are listening, they're like, "Oh man, she's just like this perfect planner." Is there something you're not good at with this stuff that you're like, "Oh, I'm still working on this?"
All the time. All the time. In, like, everything. There's always something you can improve. What I really focus on and get so excited about is the gap of where I'm at and where I wanna go, and I always have. And I feel like because of that, I truly am someone that enjoys the journey. I enjoy the challenge. I enjoy the opportunity for growth. Thriving. Why is it thriving in motherhood? Thriving is all about growing, and typically growing in rainstorms and extreme heat that it takes for plants to grow, right? Like, it's
Right.
not a comfortable process. And so I am not good at so many things, but I'm really good at enjoying the gap and trying to get where I'm going.
Oh, love that. I think my final question for you is what has changed the most for you as you have cultivated the skill of planning, especially with that framework of planning with the mindset of things that are reasonable and things that you can actually win at? What's changed?
I don't think there's an aspect of my life that has been untouched by applying these principles. So, I mean, just month to month in my homeschooling, we've made
Mm,
so many little tweaks and tiny improvements by being able to reflect, see what's working, see what's not working, and solve those problems. And in my business, 6.5 years of just trying things and learning something new and delegating what I've got figured out and then picking up something new. In my marriage, like our ability to communicate and to go through hard things together and make us stronger through it has been incredible because we've learned how to have really successful weekend planning sessions. So I understand what my husband's priorities are and I know what my priorities are, and we can be interdependent on them. In my relationship with my kids, it's so easy because here's the other thing about big threes. Let me go back to this. When you have a big 3, you can see week to week where you're spending your time. And the reality is it's not neat and tidy. There's some weeks where I'm like all in on business stuff, or I'm all in a house project, or I'm
mhm.
all in with doing things with my kids. And it starts to feel awful. And I'm like, why is it feeling so awful? And I can go back and see, like, oh, I haven't done anything for me in a while, or I haven't been spending time with my kids like I wanted to, or and so it allows me to rebalance life as I'm going. And so I'd say that's the biggest thing is that I have the information in front of me to be able to know why I'm not feeling good, why things are off, and then what I can do about it to make changes. And all of this pretty much happens while I'm taking a shower in the morning and no one is talking to me and I'm praying and I'm getting ideas come into my mind and then I write them down and I go forward.
Beautiful. Jessica, this has been such a helpful, deep, but also practical conversation. Probably my favorite kind of conversation to have. I'd like to direct people to your podcast as well as your Instagram. We'll have those all linked in the show notes. You'd mentioned having a free class where they can walk through your step process of planning. What is that and where can they find it?
Yeah, so it's Plan a Week You Can Win at thrivinginmotherhoodpodcast.com/more time. All of my other resources are also on the website, and my Instagram is thrivinginmotherhood.podcast as well.
Lovely. Thank you so much for all the amazing work that you're doing and for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Well, I'm just like curious with all these other questions I have for you. But maybe another time, another day, my babysitter's about to. Jessica Jackson, welcome back to, well, back? Okay, let me try again.
No, this is the first
I know
time.
it should be back though. You should have been on here a lot longer or a lot. I was trying to read my handwriting here. I'm like, what was the other question I have? Hold on. Just how have you? Oh, okay.